within us. They are external agents. So such agents are some, maybe some divine powers, some evil spirits, or some magical powers, and some were also believing that celestial objects like the moon and the stars, um, uh, or the magnetic field of the universe also affect or cause abnormal behavior. So the view that supernatural entities, supernatural bodies like the divine bodies or evil spirits cause abnormal behavior or create abnormal mental disorders. Such a belief is known as demonology. So a school of thought which believed in the power of supernatural bodies, uh, is known as demonology, and it is demonology was very ancient in history. So the individuals suffering from mental disorders were supposed to be possessed and controlled by magical powers or evil spirits and demons. So nature of the spirit was judged by the nature of behavior exhibited by the affected person. So if the affected person behaves in a good manner, some become very spiritual, or become holy persons. They were believed to be possessed by divine bodies or gods. If the affected person person's behavior is not accepted, then it was believed that they are possessed by evil spirits. And as it is believed that evil spirits or gods have possessed the person, and that is why the person is behaving abnormally, the treatment methods aimed at driving away these powers. So, if it was believed that some evil spirit has possessed the body, possessed the person, then the treatments included punishments like chaining them or keeping them in cages, beating, horribly beating, and sometimes people were boring a hole in their skull so that the evil spirit can go out through this hole. And another belief was the celestial bodies, they create abnormal behavior in the person. So according this belief was held by the people who are the believers of or followers of astrology. um, so, according to this notion, the movements of the moon and the stars have an effect on the behavior of people. We have heard the word lunatic, and the word was used to describe abnormal people. He is a lunatic. Means he is abnormal or he is mentally disordered. And why lunatic? The word comes from luna, the Latin word luna. Luna means moon. So that means the moon has effect on the person, and some moon is responsible for the abnormal behavior in the person. And they emphasized these persons who believe in or follow astrology. They try to pacify the stars or the moon for making the abnormal behavior normal. Then another model is biological model. Biological model attributed mental disorders to physical diseases or biochemical physical causes, or something within body cause mental disorder. Physical disease, infection, or biochemical imbalances within the body are responsible for mental disorder. Why biological models came into force? There was a condition called general paresis. General paresis. In general paresis, the nervous system of the person affected by general paresis, functioning of the nervous system deteriorates gradually. So there is gradual decrease in intellectual and mental functioning of the person. So um, mental functions, intellectual functions are also affected. And it was observed that people who have suffered from syphilis, a physical disease, an infection, we can say. Um, syphilis affected people in syphilis affected people, general paresia uh, doesn't go worse. So the condition doesn't become worse if the person is affected by syphilis. So people believed that there is some link between syphilis infection and general paresis. So the germs or the bacteria which cause syphilis, they may be beneficial for the general paresis affected person. And from this observation, it was believed that physical diseases may be responsible for mental disorders. So, and then there came biological models of mental disorders or psychopathology. So we know the father of medicine, Hippocrates. So Hippocrates hypothesized that for the first time, Hippocrates also hypothesized that abnormal behavior, like other forms of disease, are caused by imbalance of four humors. You all know the four humor theory of personality developed by Hippocrates. So there are four body fluids or four humors. These fluids are blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And Hippocrates believed that imbalance among these four body fluids cause mental diseases. So various types of disorders or psychopathology resulted from either an excess or a deficiency of one of these four fluids. So treatment procedures were designed during Hippocrates' time in an attempt to restore the ideal balance of these fluids. So rest, good diet, and exercise were recommended for restoring the balance of these body fluids. After Hippocrates, a Roman physician, Hippocrates was Greek. Another Roman physician, Galen, he also adopted Hippocratic theory and advocated that the four fluids relate to environmental concepts such as heat, dryness, moisture, and cold. So, if the environment is hot, then blood increases. If the environment is dry, black bile gets balance, the quantity of bile, desired quantity of black bile in the body gets disturbed, like this. So each fluid was related to one quality. Like Hippocrates has also opined that excess of excess of one or more fluids were treated by regulating the environment. So Galen believed that environmental factors, environment determines the imbalance of these fluids. So we can regulate the environment to restore the balance. So if according to the necessity, we can increase or decrease heat or moisture or cold depending on the deficiency of the fluid. And early biological models of mental disorders used some crude, unique techniques of treatment. So, since they were during early period, it was believed that mm, factors within our body, or these something within our body causes mental disorder. So they were trying to trying to correct these factors causing believed to be causing mental disorders. So it was believed that if excess blood is there in the body, the person may behave lunatically. So they were during early period, it was tried to decrease the amount of blood in the body by bloodletting. How bloodletting was done? Sometimes leeches were thrown to the body. So leeches suck blood from the body. So a measured amount of blood was removed by leeches to minimize aggressive tendencies. So it was believed that if amount of blood is more or is excess, the person behaves aggressively. So to bring him back to normal, bloods were removed from his body. Another belief was that um, by inducing vomiting, we can reduce also depression. So induced vomiting was also used to treat depression. Then in the 19th century, J.P. Gray, another physician, he theorized that mental disorder or insanity was always due to physical causes and emphasis should be on rest and diet, proper room temperature, and ventilation. J.P. Gray invented the rotary fan. It uh, so the rotary contribution of J.P. Gray during the 19th century was the invention of rotary fan for use of the mentally ill patients, and it was used in the state hospital in New York. Um, another important figure during 19th century who has great contribution to the field of psychopathology was Emile Kraepelin, a French person, French physician. So Kraepelin contributed to the area of diagnosis and classification of psychological disorders. So, Kraepelin observed that certain symptom patterns occurred together regularly in a particular type of mental disorder. So, he defined that mental disorder in terms of these symptom patterns. So he observed several symptom patterns regularly occur in certain type of mental disorders. So he is described these types of disorders and worked out a scheme of classification. And Emile's scheme of classification is the basis of the present DSM system. We are now following the DSM system, and DSM system is based on Kraepelin's work. Kraepelin believed each type of mental disorder is distinct from the others, each having a specific predetermined and predictable pattern and outcome. So, Kraepelin also, in this way, he described the symptoms of schizophrenia, and his descriptions of schizophrenia are still very useful. During the 20th century, a Viennese physician Sakel began using higher and higher doses of insulin to treat mentally ill patients. So this was known as insulin therapy. Insulin was given to mentally ill patients. It was believed that if in the we know insulin is nowadays insulin is given to diabetic patients who have higher blood sugar level. So insulin reduces the level of sugar in the blood, and during Sakel's time, it was believed that hypoglycemia, that means below decreased sugar level can sugar level can cure psychotic patients. So, hypoglycemia induced coma could make the psychotic patients normal. It was believed. That's why insulin therapy was given. But the method was abandoned because it was dangerous. Very low level of hypoglycemia can cause coma and even death. So this method was very dangerous. That's why nowadays insulin therapy is not given to mentally ill patients. And in 1934, Hungarian neuropsychiatrist Meduna believed mistakenly that schizophrenia and epilepsy were antagonistic disorders. He thought epilepsy and schizophrenia are opposite or contradictory to each other. That means an epileptic patient cannot develop schizophrenia. This belief is, of course, not true. It is not correct. But in 1930s, Meduna believed this thing. So what Meduna did? What is the cause of epilepsy? Epilepsy is caused by irregular firing of the nervous system or neurons in the brain. Irregular firing in the neurons of the brain cause epileptic fits. So if epileptic fits can cause decrease in the can reduce schizophrenic symptoms, then Meduna tried to give electric shocks or induce seizures. Tried to induce seizure like epileptic seizure in order to treat schizophrenia. At first, Meduna induced seizures with camphor and then metrazole, a chemical drug. So, Meduna is regarded as the father of convulsive therapy. During that time, seizures, brain seizures were created or were induced by chemicals or drugs like camphor or metrazole drug. In 1938, Italian neuropsychiatrist Sarletti and his assistant Binny used electricity as a substitute for metrazole in convulsive therapy. So, Sarletti and Binny, they induced brain seizures electrically. So, electric convulsive therapy or ECT came to being. And it was used, ECT was electroconvulsive therapy was used to persons affected by delusions. Electroconvulsive therapy is a psychiatric treatment during which generalized seizure is electrically induced to manage mental disorders. And electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy is still being used. So, we have discussed about the how the biological perspective of psychopathology developed, starting from the time of Hippocrates till now. And nowadays, very improved variety of drugs have been also developed, and mentally ill patients are treated with those drugs, and various neurological methods or instruments have been developed like MRI, MFRI, etc., which also help in the diagnosis and the treatment of psychological disorders. Then came psychological approaches. Psychological paradigm. So actually, how did psychological paradigm came into force? Psychological paradigm believes that psychological factors are responsible for mental disorders. So not only factors within the body, physical factors, psychological factors are also responsible for the development of mental disorders. How psychological paradigm, how did people begin to believe that psychological factors also cause mental disorder? There was a French physician called Mesmer. Mesmer was a doctor, physician, but his treatment method was very much psychological. What he was doing was that his patients were sitting around a table, and Mesmer came into the room with buckets filled with some solutions, chemical solutions. Nobody knew what the solutions were, and Mesmer dipped some rods into these solutions and touched his patients with these rods. So, and surprisingly, after the touch of the rods, the patients patient's symptoms were um, patient's symptoms disappeared, though the patients were becoming free of their symptoms. That means um, mm, they were they were being cured. So symptoms subsided. So it was not known to anybody which solutions were used by Mesmer, but just at the touch of the rods, the patients uh, get cured. So from this, psychological paradigm developed. That means the psychologically the patients think that they are being treated and they get normal. Um, Let us discuss several psychological approaches. First, we will discuss the psychoanalytic approach. So, psychoanalysis was pioneered by Sigmund Freud. We know Freud. Freud talked of or emphasized the role of unconscious mind and internal mental processes in psychopathology. And according to him, according to Freud, our mind or human psyche, consists of the three components: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id consists of biological instincts. The id is present at birth, and id is the reservoir of all our biological instincts and wishes related to our sexual and aggressive drives, and it is irrational. It is irrational. It strives for immediate gratification of instincts without considering for consequences. So, this immediate gratification of instinct by any method is known as pleasure principle. So, it only seeks pleasure, only seeks gratification of instincts, and it has its own characteristic way of processing information, that is known as primary process. So it follows primary process. The second part of the psyche is known as the ego. The ego ensures that we must find, we cannot always immediate strive for immediate gratification of instincts. Suppose you are eating something, you are eating jalebi, and I saw you. I had a desire to eat jalebi. So my id, if my id is dominant, the will desire that I should snatch the jalebi away from you. So, but it is not always socially desirable. It is wrong. Snatching away immediate gratification is wrong. So there is another, the third constituent of this psyche is superego. Superego is our storehouse of moral and ethical standards. So superego will say that no, snatching away is wrong. So the id wants immediate gratification, and the superego will say no, that is wrong. So there is always conflict between the id and the superego, and to pacify the conflict between the id and the superego, ego comes to function. So the function of ego is to ensure that we must find ways to meet our basic needs. Instincts, biological instincts must be satisfied, must be met, and that is necessary for our survival. But the ways we meet our biological needs must be in line with the societal demands, societal standards. So I cannot snatch the jalebi away from you. If I want to eat jalebi, so I may go to a shop and buy jalebi. So I have to wait till really it is so available to me in a so socially desirable manner. So the ego operates according to the reality principle. So it is always reality based ego. And ego is characterized by logic, reason, and operates on secondary process. Processing or functioning of ego is known as secondary process. So we have discussed that the ego tries to resolve conflicts between the demands of the id within the permitted boundaries of superego. I have already told you about the third component of our psyche, that is the superego, and superego is the storehouse of our moral and ethical standards, mainly taught by our parents, teachers, and our culture, society. So superego is referred to as the conscience of our psyche, when we do something wrong, and our ethical and moral standards are violated, the superego generates guilt or due to the presence of our conscience. We feel guilty. And superego operates according to the moral principle. Um, And I have already told you the ego mediates the conflict between the id and the superego according to the realities of the world. If the ego can mediate successfully and pacify the conflict successfully, the individual is well adjusted. Otherwise, if the conflict between the id and the superego is not pacified, or the ego is not successful in its goal, then the individual has adjustment problems. If the ego cannot balance the id and the superego, either the id or the superego becomes stronger than the other, then the individual has adjustment problems. So, a healthy individual should have a strong ego power. Ego strength should be there. In addition to the these three parts of the psyche, Freud also talked of three levels of consciousness, three layers of consciousness. These are conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious. The conscious mind is the part of the mind about which we are aware at a particular time. Suppose I ask you, what is your name? You can immediately answer me. So your name is in your conscious mind. So, but the conscious mind is a small part of our mental life. Below the conscious mind is the pre-conscious. Pre-conscious comprises of thoughts or activities which are not immediately present in our conscious mind, but they can be brought to our conscious mind easily. Suppose I ask you, what did you have in your lunch? At present, you are not thinking about your lunch. You are listening to my lecture. But if I ask you, what have you had in your lunch, you can remember and tell me the foods you have taken. So these are in pre-conscious mind. Suppose I ask you, what is the capital of France? You are not thinking about Paris at this moment, but you can bring this information to your conscious mind easily, and you can tell me. And the largest segment of mind is the unconscious. It is a deeper level of the mind, and largest segment. Unconscious mainly comprises the id, and it is not easily reachable. We cannot recover the information from our unconscious mind easily. it is very difficult. So the id is totally unconscious, and the ego and the superego reside at all the three levels of consciousness. So you can see this picture. The white portion, the uppermost white portion is the ego, and is our conscious mind, uppermost white portion. Then comes a light gray portion, which is pre-conscious, and the dark gray portion is unconscious. And there is a red line which demarcates the ego and superego and id. So ego um, consist of larger portion of conscious mind, some pre-conscious mind, and some unconscious mind. Um, the ego consists of or resides in all these three levels of consciousness. And the superego also resides in these three levels, though the major portion of superego is pre-conscious. And the id is totally unconscious. You can see the area beneath this red line. Then Freud also talked of 5 stages of psychological development, and Freud emphasized the biological instinct, mainly our sexual instinct. So, as Freud emphasized on sexual instinct, and gratification of our sexual instinct is very important for our development. The stages of development are in line with the development of our sexuality. So the stages of development in Freud's theory are known as stages of psychosexual development. So there are 5 stages of psychosexual development. The individual passes through all these stages, and at each stage of development a specific area of the body is sensitive to sexual pleasure or instinctual pleasure. This area is known as erogenous zone. So at each stage a different erogenous zone is sensitive, and over gratification or under gratification of erogenous needs at any particular stage results in fixation, which leaves a strong impression or strong effect on the individual, and that is reflected throughout the adult personality. And first is oral stage. Oral stage spans from birth to 2 years, roughly 1.5 or 2 years. And in oral stage, the major source of pleasure is mouth, and the infant gets pleasure through mouth by the act of sucking, biting, etc. And fixation at this stage appears if the individual is fixated at this stage he will develop to later stage. But when he is under stress, he will behave in a manner that is consistent um, to the or the that is characteristic of the oral stage. So if fix therefore an orally fixated individual when becomes adult, he will use his mouth to get pleasure, because the behavior during oral stage, characteristic behavior was sucking and biting or using mouth. The orally fixated adult will also use mouth to get pleasure, and such persons will chew pans, smoke, and talk a lot, etc. The second stage is anal stage. Anal stage extends from 2 to 3 years when toilet training begins. Anal stage comes from the word anus. That means during the anal stage, the child gets pleasure through the anus. So, as toilet training begins during this stage, the child is or the toddler is told to use the toilet in a particular time or in a particular manner. So the child is expected to defecate or to pass fecal matters at a particular place, not here and there, at a particular place, at a particular time, and in a particular manner. So he has to control his defecation. He is not expected to defecate when and where he wants. He has to control. So from this control, the child learns to develop the control of his body, and as he learns to control his body, ego develops in this stage. So the ego develops during the anal stage, and if a fixation occurs at this stage, the person will be very neat and clean and strict in following rules and norms. There are two types of fixation during anal stage: anal retentive and anal expulsive. The anal retentive person will be very neat and clean, but the anal expulsive person will be very disorganized. Usually, the anal retentive persons are misers, and the anal expulsive persons are very generous, according to Freud. The third stage is phallic stage. This phallic stage spans from 3 to 5 years. Phallic stage, the word phallic comes from the word phallus. Phallus means penis. Why this is named so? Because the erogenous zone becomes the genitals. The penis is very important at this stage. For a 3-year-old child, the penis is very important, both for boys and girls, according to Freud. in this stage, the boys have an sexual attraction towards the opposite sex parent, that is their mothers. This is known as Oedipus complex. While girls also have an attraction towards their father. So, from as the boy gets sexually attracted to his mother, um, he also has a fear that the father may punish him. So the father may take away his penis. So he, due to this fear of punishment, the boy try to satisfy his father, to make his father happy. A little boy, how he makes his tries to make his father happy or satisfied? By imitating the behavior of the father. So the boy tries to imitate the behavior of the father. Not only the behavior, the boy also begins to like the adapt the values of the father also. So, and the girl imitates the behavior and values of her mother. From this, so superego develops. So the superego develops during the phallic stage, and we know that the erogenous zone is now the penis or the genitalia. After the when the boy is 5 year old, what happens? Usually schooling starts. The boy goes to school. So here importance is given to academic and other social skills. So the sexual drives are latent. They are not overt. They subside. That's why they are hidden. That's why the fourth stage is known as latency stage. And latency stage spans from 5 to 12 years. And instead of finding sexual pleasure, the boy or the child is engaged in acquiring social, academic, and professional skills. Then, finally, when at the age of 12, poverty begins, sexual drives again reappear, and we know the erogenous zone has become erogenous zone is in has been in the genitalia since phallic stage. So in genital stage also the erogenous zone is the genitalia, but at genital stage the child or the adolescent is no more confined to his family only or to his home. He goes to school, colleges. So he finds his sexual partner. He deserves for a sexual partner other than the opposite sex parent. So somebody outside his family. Um, and during the genital stage, the person tries to make a good impression on the members of the opposite sex through his or her looks, dress, and conversation, etc. So each stage of development is important for a healthy adjustment, and fixation at any stage may result in formation of psychopathology. Uh, Anxiety. Let us discuss about anxiety. We know Freud told that the function of the ego is to satisfy the id desires in a manner which is consistent with the moral standards of the superego. So, if the id desires are not satisfied, tension arises. If instincts are not satisfied, tension uh, will be there. So, a major cause of tension is anxiety. So, people try to reduce tension always. Freud talks of real anxiety, neurotic anxiety, and moral anxiety. Real anxiety, we know it is caused by some real fears. Suppose a dog is following me to, or a dog is running after me. Um, I may be afraid of the dog, or I'm afraid of a tiger, lest it should eat me. That is real anxiety. Neurotic anxiety comes from an unconscious fear. The source of fear is not real, it is in our unconscious mind. So, the unconscious mind means it is mainly occupied, unconscious mind is mainly occupied with our id desires, id instincts, id impulses. So the neurotic anxiety arises from our id impulses, and moral anxiety comes from a fear of violating our moral codes. And that appears as feelings of guilt or shame. So the conflict between id and superego produce anxiety, that is a threat to ego. So the ego tries to reduce the anxiety using some unconscious protective processes. Um, and these processes are known as defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are coping mechanisms to protect ego against neurotic anxiety. So, the ego uses defense mechanisms in order to protect itself from neurotic anxiety. Okay, so all defense, there are several defense mechanisms, and all these defense mechanisms share two common properties. They often appear unconsciously, and they tend to distort or transfer or otherwise falsify reality. So that means defense mechanisms are mechanisms followed by the ego unconsciously to transform or distort the reality. There are several defense mechanisms: denial, displacement, intellectualization, projection, rationalization, reaction formation, regression, repression, sublimation, etc. So there are other defense mechanisms also there. And as we have discussed that the unconscious, unfulfilled id desires are the cause of our maladaptive behavior or cause of our anxiety, neurotic anxiety. And if neurotic anxiety is not successfully reduced by the ego, then neurotic anxiety is not solved, then mental illness will be there. So, what is the goal of therapy? Um, According to the psychoanalytic school of thought, so psychoanalytic therapy aims at reliving or bringing back the repressed fantasies and fears or thoughts from the unconscious to the conscious mind. So when so that the individual can be aware of his unconscious fantasies or unconscious fears. If it is brought to the conscious level, then only the individual will be aware of these. So when the individual is aware of his unconscious conflicts, then he or she can solve it in a matured way. These are conflicts, unsolved conflicts, repressed from his childhood. Now he has become he or she has become adult, so he or she can solve the conflict, those unconscious conflicts, in a matured manner, and the illness, the symptoms will subside, will go away. So that is the goal of psychoanalytic therapy. But the problem is to know those unconscious conflicts. So Freud talked of several methods to know the unconscious mind. They are dream interpretation, free association, analyzing the sleeps of tongue, etc. So through these methods, or by these methods, free association means the client is allowed to talk to the therapist whatever comes to his or her mind. So in an unobstructed, uncensored manner. So when he or she is allowed to talk freely, the therapist can know the unconscious conflicts of the person. And that's why dream, and like this dream interpretation is another method. And sleeps of tongue are also another methods to reach the unconscious mind. So, if we make an evaluation of Freud's theory, we would see that Freud's hypotheses are neither verifiable nor falsifiable. It is very difficult to prove Freud. It is also equally difficult to disprove Freud. It is not clear what would count as evidence sufficient to confirm or refute his theoretical claims. The theory is based on an inadequate conceptualization of the experience of women. According to Freud, women's development, moral development, or personality development is not complete because they don't have a penis and they suffer from penis envy. That conceptualization of Freud is regarded as inadequate and it is not accepted. bilaters. Freud also overemphasizes the role of sexuality in human psychological development. There are other important areas also. Freud only emphasized on sexuality. Another psychological approach to psychopathology is humanistic approach. Humanistic view puts emphasis on the positive aspects of life, free choices, personal growth experiences, etc. And it was developed by Carl Rogers and Maslow. Rogers claimed that human beings have a capacity for self-healing and personal growth, leading to self-actualization. Um, Rogers didn't accept Freud's view that human beings are essentially governed by only by biological instincts of sex and aggression. Rogers says that human beings are basically good. They are responsible persons. Then they strive for personal growth, and they have the capacity for self actualization. Self is a very important notion in Rogers' theory. Self concept is formed as a result of interaction with the environment. So, differentiate when the child differentiates himself or herself from the rest of the world, his self concept begins to develop. So it is the dependent on differentiating I from rest of the world. It is an individual's set of beliefs, knowledge, and feelings about himself or herself. It is derived from direct experience or from what other people tell him or her about himself or herself. Suppose I tell you, oh, you are very good, your handwriting is very good, or you are playing chess. Mm, so, what significant people in your life tell about you forms a part of your self concept. Uh, Only the part of the self that is accessible to consciousness constitute the self concept. So Rogers didn't accept that we should study or we should fathom the unconscious mind. We only center our attention on conscious mind. And people, according to Rogers, strive to achieve self actualization. Self actualization, what is self actualization? I am explaining. Self concept, I have told about self concept. Self concept consists of two selves. One is a real self, and the other is ideal self. The real self is the individual's perception of his actual characteristics, traits, and abilities, what the person actually is. And the ideal self is the individual's perception of what he or she should or would like to be. So, what you would like to be is your ideal self. What you think you are is your real self. So the ideal self primarily comes from important, significant persons in your life, most often the parents. When the real self and ideal self are similar to each other, people feel competent, and there is congruence. Congruence means a match or an overlap between the real self and ideal self. When congruency is achieved, the person is mentally healthy. Um, and a mismatch between the real self and the ideal self um, can result in anxiety and neurotic behavior. That means a mentally ill person, in a mentally ill person, the gap between the real self and the ideal self is very wide. In general, we try to preserve congruence, and incongruence creates anxiety. As a result, the individual acts defensively. In order to reduce anxiety, the individual acts defensively. Rogers also talks of two defense mechanisms, that is denial and distortion. Denial involves refusing to accept at conscious level that the experience happened, and distortion means misremembering the experience to make it consistent with the perceived self. Suppose I am giving you, you can see this picture here. There is the real self and the ideal self. There is very little overlap between the two. So this is a situation of incongruence, and the figure in the right side, the overlap between the two is more. So it is, there is congruence. Then Rogers also suggested non-directive person-centered therapy to treat his clients. Suggested Rogers suggested three attitudes on the part of the therapist uh, as necessary for change in client. These three characteristics, that is empathy, unconditional positive regard, and genuineness. These three characteristics of the therapist can bring a change in the client. Congruent people are more likely to achieve self actualization. When the real self and the ideal self totally overlap, we can say self actualization uh, has been achieved. So, self actualization is realizing one's full potential. So, you think whatever you can do is your is becomes real. You can achieve whatever you think you can do. So there is no gap between your real self and the ideal self. So there is total congruence, and congruent people can achieve self actualization. Congruence primarily depends on how significant people in person's life react to him. Thus, behavior of others can impede or facilitate self-actualization. Because if our ideal self is very unrealistic, then there will be incongruence. Suppose I want to study psychology, and my parents they place a condition, put a condition on me that they will like me if I act according to their desire, and if I study medicine. So, but I like to study psychology. So, if I study medicine, there is a huge gap between my real self and ideal self. Um, that is, there will be incongruence. And Rogers talked of unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard is giving love, acceptance, to the uh, child, or on the part of the parent it is to the child, and on the part of the therapist it is to the client. This is not contingent on any specific behavior. This is unconditional acceptance. And very often parents impose conditions of worth on children. If you become fast, then I will like you. That is conditions of worth. If you get IAS, I will praise you. There is condition. But these are conditions under which the child will be accepted or loved. This is conditional positive regard. Conditional positive regard is, that means it is love, affection, warmth that depend on doing what those other significant persons want, what my parents want, what my teacher wants. These are conditional positive regard. Such conditions of worth may lead to discrepancy between self concept and experience. So, positive self regard follows automatically if one has received unconditional positive regard. If others provide you unconditional positive regard, you will also accept yourself. You will love, you will respect yourself. So, Rogers says that disapprove the child's negative behavior rather than the child herself. And evaluation of Rogers' theory, it is criticized that it seems like a philosophical view rather than a concrete psychological theory, and great reliance on uh, experience, actual experience, only conscious experience. Unconscious mind is totally ignored. But nowadays, by the cognitivists, on role of unconscious mind is also being recognized. Behaviorists criticize that some concepts like self-actualization are very difficult to define and tested experimentally. Um, and As this theory, Rogers' theory, provides a very rosy picture of a personality, it cannot explain more negative aspects of human nature, like antisocial personality, disordered people, psychopathic personality, etc. And uh, the we can now discuss the behavioral approach. Behavioral approach is the learning approach, which is basically developed out of the learning theories of Pavlov and Skinner. Pavlov developed the classical conditioning approach, and Skinner developed the operant conditioning method. So, behavioral approach focuses on the role of learning in explaining both normal and abnormal behavior. To be them, to behaviorists, every behavior is learned. There is no role of personality, no role of mind, no role of your desire, expectation, etc., interest, etc. Every behavior, they emphasize on overt behavior, and every behavior is learned through reinforcement. And as every normal behavior is learned, according to them, abnormal behavior is also learned. You know the role of classical, you know the classical conditioning. Pavlov's experiment of a dog who began to salivate at the sound of a bell, because the bell was associated with the presentation of the food. So, after some repeated presentations of food together with bell, the sorry bell to followed by the food, the dog started to salivate to the sound of the bell, even if no food was given. So he called it the salivation to the sound of the bell is called as conditioned response, and um, the salivation and the bell which elicited salivation is known as conditioned stimulus, and salivation to food is known as unconditioned stimulus, a unconditioned response, and food is known as unconditioned stimulus. And we can explain various psychological problems like phobias or excessive fears with the help of classical conditioning. For example, a person may develop a phobia for riding on elevators following a traumatic experience on an elevator. In this example, a previously neutral stimulus, that is the elevator, becomes paired or associated with an aversive stimulus, that is a trauma, and this association leads to the development of conditioned response, fear response, that is phobia. Operant conditioning was developed by Skinner. I think you know Skinner's experiment and his reinforcements. Reinforcement is necessary for learning through operant conditioning. Reinforcers are changes in the environment that increase the frequency of the preceding behavior. So, if a behavior is followed by reinforcement, it is strengthened. The probability of the showing the that particular behavior increases. So behaviors that lead to rewarding consequences are strengthened. That is, they are more likely to occur again. And Skinner identified two types of reinforcers: positive reinforcers, negative reinforcers. Positive reinforcers and negative reinforcers both increase the frequency of behavior. Positive reinforcers increase the frequency of behavior when they are introduced or presented. Negative reinforcers increase the frequency of behavior when they are removed. And Skinner also distinguished punishment and omission training. Punishments are aversive stimuli that decrease the frequency of the behavior they follow. Omission training involves removal or termination of something pleasant for suppressing or weakening a response. So, omission training is sometimes called as a negative punishment. So, punishment and omission training aim at decreasing the frequency of a particular behavior. And social cognitive theory, advocated by Bandura mainly. There are other social cognitive theories, Rotter, Walter Mischel. They expanded traditional learning theory by including role for thinking or cognition and cognition. I told you, behaviorists totally disregarded the role of thinking, memory, perception, or anything that your cognition, intelligence, interest, anything that is within the person, they were discarded by they were not accepted, rejected, they were rejected by the behaviorists. But social cognitive theorists, they um, accepted the traditional learning theory, but they also recognized the role of these thinking, cognition, etc. Expectation, values, etc. And Bandura, he explained learning by observation, which is also called modeling. And according to Bandura, a phobia for spiders may be learned by observing the fearful reactions of others in real life, on television, or in movies. That means, though I myself have not experienced the harmful uh, biting of spiders, I may develop it by observing the fearful reactions of others. And social cognitive theorists, they believe the people, they have an impact on their environment, just as their environment has an impact on them. We can also change our environment. And um, they emphasized on modeling. They also emphasized factors within the person, such as expectancies, our expectations, values placed on a particular goals, etc., in explaining our behavior. And behavior therapy, they have developed a number of behavior modification techniques based on the principles of operant conditioning as well as classical conditioning. Like they have systematic desensitization, relaxation therapy, modeling, shaping, token economy, biofeedback, etc. So for therapy behavior, there are a number of behavior therapy. Um, if we evaluate behavioral perspective, behaviorism cannot explain the richness of human behavior. So, behavior therapy holds a very mechanical view of human beings. And they place a very little emphasis on genetic contribution of behavior. They do not provide a full account of subjective experience, such as self-awareness or flow of consciousness. But genetic contributions also are there. Scientists have found out, but the behaviorists, they deny the contribution of genes. Then next, let us discuss about the classification of psychopathology. Um, Classification is basic to any science, and classification is otherwise known as taxonomy. And in every science, classification is very necessary. It also refers to nomenclature, which describes the names and labels that may make up a particular disorder. Why classification is important? Because if we cannot label and order objects or experiences or behaviors, scientists cannot communicate with one another, and our knowledge will not advance. So to communicate our knowledge, communicate our research results, to develop a particular treatment procedure, to distinguish one type of disorder from another. Classification is very much necessary, and there are different approaches to classification. Approach, categorical approach. Kraepelin mainly followed categorical approach. So they categorize mental disorders. Uh, a particular disorder is distinctly different from another type of disorder. So they are distinct categories. The second approach is a dimensional approach. Here we describe a patient along a number of continuous dimensions, such as cognitions, moods, and behaviors, etc., which can be presented and quantified on a scale. For example, on a scale of 1 to 2, a patient might be rated as severely anxious, his rating may be 10, moderately depressed, mildly manic, etc. And thus, we can create a profile of the patient. That is a dimensional approach. The third type of approach is prototypical approach. Prototypical approach identifies some essential characteristics of a disorder and allows for certain non-essential variations that do not necessarily change the classifications. That means a typical person having a particular disorder or of that group has the characteristics. A typical person has these characteristics. So um, uh, any person, in order to be diagnosed uh, as having same disorder, must have the similar characteristics. May not all the characteristics, but some of the characteristics must be present. For example, in depression, say there are 5 important symptoms, such as a depressed mood all the day, weight loss, insomnia, fatigue, and feeling of worthlessness. For a person might have, for a person to be diagnosed as having depression, might have 3 or 4 of the characteristics of the depression, not necessarily all the 5 of them. Having 3 characteristics, he can still be diagnosed as having depression. That is prototypical approach. And if we go to study the history of classification of psychopathology, uh, our development of ICD. ICD means International Statistical Classification of Disease and Related Health Problems. In 1893, first international list of causes of death was published. Why people die? Causes of death, list of causes of death was published. This list stimulated worldwide uh, uh, an organized effort for classification of diseases, which resulted in ICD-1. ICD-1 was published by the World Health Organization in the year 1900. However, um, it was only ICD-6 which published uh, uh, which was published with a separate section on mental disorder. So ICD-6 was published in 1949, and for the first time it included a separate section on mental disorder. And now ICD gets revised again and again, and now ICD-11 is in force, and ICD-11 officially came into effect on January 2022, and it is being used in different countries. Another classification system is a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM. ICD was published by World Health Organization, and DSM was published by the American Psychiatric Association, or APA. It is a handbook used most often. APA use this in diagnosing mental disorders in United States and some other countries also. In view of the needs arisen from World War II, DSM was first published. DSM-1 was first, for the first time, published in 1952. In 1949, the WHO published the sixth revision of the ICD, which included a section on mental disorder for the first time. Consequently, the APA, or American Psychiatric Association, developed a classification system for use in the United States. This classification system is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which was published in 1952. DSM-1 listed 106 mental disorders, and it was basically psychoanalytic in its theoretical orientation. Then came DSM-2 in 1968. It listed 182 disorders, mental disorders. Both DSM-1 and DSM-2 reflected the predominant psychodynamic approach or perspective, although they also included biological and sociological perspectives. And it was like Kreplin's system of classification. DSM-2 made a distinction between neurosis and psychosis. Symptoms were not specified in detail for specific disorder. DSM-3 in 1980 came into force, and it listed 265 diagnostic categories. With 93% changes in nomenclature, names were changed. Diagnostic criteria, for example, there was in DSM-2, there was disease like hysteria, but in DSM-3, there is the name was changed. Now, there is no disease called hysteria. It is a conversion disorder. So nomenclature were changed. Diagnostic criteria for each of these disorders were mentioned, and it was multi-axial with 5 axes. DSM 3 was criticized on the ground that, according to the diagnostic characteristics of DSM 3, 20 to 30% of the population are diagnosed as having behavioral or mental disorders, which is not actually true. ଏତେ ଗୁଡ଼ାଏ ଲୋକ ଆମର mentally disordered ନୁହନ୍ତି. If we follow DSM-3 criteria for diagnosis, 20 to 30% of people would be diagnosed as having mental problems. Then DSM-3 R revised was DSM-3 was revised in 1987. Here categories were renamed, reorganized, and significant changes in criteria were made. 6 categories were deleted, while some new categories were added, and in total it contained 292 different mental disorders. Then in 1994, DSM-4 came. DSM-4 listed 297 disorders. Then in 2000, DSM-4, yes, in DSM-4, a significant major change, major addition in diagnostic categories is that for diagnosis of a particular disorder, this symptom, it was a necessary requirement that this symptom must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. If your functioning is not impaired significantly, then you may have symptoms, but if otherwise your functionings are okay, then you will not be diagnosed as mentally disordered. So DSM-4, there was a text revision of DSM-4 known as DSM-4-TR. It was published in 2000. The diagnostic categories and the vast majority of the specific criteria were basically unchanged. DSM-4, whatever was there in DSM-4, majority of them are written in DSM-4-TR. Only the text sessions giving extra information on each diagnosis were updated. And this is more in line with the ICD. So there is a attempt to maintain consistency with the ICD. Your syllabus is on DSM-4-TR, but now DSM-4-TR has also been changed. In 2013, DSM-5 came into force. And DSM-5 has several major changes. DSM-4 and DSM-4-TR also, they were multi-axial in nature. The patient has to be described along 5 axes. But DSM-5 in DSM-5, multi-axial system of diagnosis was discarded. It is divided into 3 sections, and you can notice that here DSM-4, in DSM-4, 4 is written in uh, Roman numerals, IV, Roman numerals. But in DSM-5, Arabic numerals are used. 5 is Arabic numerals are used. And in 2022, DSM-5-TR has also came into being. And you have syllabus, your syllabus is based on DSM-4-TR in this chapter, and detailed description of DSM-4-TR is there. It is mainly, it is multi-axial classification. There are 5 axes. The patient has to be described along 5 axes. The first axis discusses and the clinical disorders, and it contains all the disorders except mental retardation and personality disorders. Access to describes or places personality disorders and mental retardation. These two disorders, personality disorders and mental retardation, are placed along axis 2 because they are enduring and rigid patterns of maladaptive behavior. They do not get cured. And axis 3 describes other general medical conditions, whether other medical problems are there or not. Axis 4 describes psychosocial and environmental problems of the patient. And axis 5 talks about a global assessment of relational functioning. The clinicians rate the client's current level of psychological, social, and occupational functioning using a 0 to 100 scale. These are the 5 axes of DSM-4-TR. Evaluation of DSM-4, it lacks validity and reliability because it is mainly prototypical in nature. Prototypical in nature means they describe 8 to 10 features, clinical features of every disorder, each disorder, and a person can be diagnosed as having that particular disorder if he has a certain number, say 5 or 6 number of symptoms. So all the persons diagnosed as having a particular disorder do not have the same symptoms. So it lacks validity and reliability. It is superficial because it only describes symptoms without mentioning underlying causes. It is culturally biased. It is fundamentally having a Euro-American outlook. Other cultures, we have cultural and ethnic diversity, they are even not recognized by researchers following this DSM 4-TR. And it is said that the way categories have been substantially increasing is often due to the influence of pharmaceutical companies. Drug companies influence the researchers to add add more and more number of disorders so that their drugs will be sold out. So, if you have any doubt, you can ask me. We can wind up now. Do you have any doubt?
No, no.
Okay. We will meet.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, can you provide this PDF?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
I can provide. We will meet on day after tomorrow on 12th at the same time. Okay.
Okay.
Good night. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye. Good night, ma'am.
Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Welcome.
ଆପଣଙ୍କ ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରୁ କିଏ ଓଡିଶାରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି? ଆପଣ ମାନେ ଓଡିଶାର? ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
ହଁ, ଓଡ଼ିଶାରୁ।
ସାର୍ ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ ପାଇଁ ଆପଣ ଫାର୍ଷ୍ଟ ଇୟର ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ ପାଇଁ କେମିତି କଣ କଲେ?
ମୁଁ ତ କରିନି ଏବେ ଯାଏ ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ।
ଆଚ୍ଛା।
ବାକି ମାନେ କରିଛନ୍ତି, ପଚାରି ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ ଟିକେ।
ନାଇଁ
ମୁଁ ତ
ମ୍ୟାଡାମ, ମୁଁ ବି କରିନି, କରିବି ବାକି।
ହଁ, ମୁଁ ବି ଏପ୍ରିଲରେ କରିବି।
ମାନେ ଓଡିଶାରେ କୋଉଠି ଆଭେଲେବଲ ଅଛି କରିବା ପାଇଁ?
ବହୁତ ଜାଗା ଅଛି।
ବହୁତ ଅଛି।
ହଁ।
କିମ୍ସ ଅଛି, ଏସସିବି ଅଛି, ଚେତନା ଅଛି, କ୍ୟାପିଟାଲ ହସ୍ପିଟାଲ ଅଛି, ବହୁତ ଜାଗା ଅଛି।
ଚେତନା ଆମର ଯୋଉଟା ଇଣ୍ଟେଲେକ୍ଚୁଆଲ ଡିସାବିଲିଟି ପାଇଁ ଯୋଉ ଇନଷ୍ଟିଚ୍ୟୁଟ ତ?
ହଁ ହଁ ହଁ।
ଆପଣଙ୍କର ସେ ରେଡିଓ ସେଣ୍ଟର ପାଖରେ, ଆକାଶବାଣୀ କେନ୍ଦ୍ର ପାଖରେ?
ନା ନା, ଆକାଶବାଣୀ ଚେତନାଟା ତ ସେଠି ନୁହଁ ନା। ସେଣ୍ଟ୍ରାଲ ହଉଛି ଯୋଉ ମେଣ୍ଟାଲି ଡିଜର୍ଡର ଲୋକ ଅଛନ୍ତି।
ହଁ ହଁ, ଭାଗିରଥୀ ସାର୍ ଅଛନ୍ତି ତ ସେଠି?
ଭାଇର ଇଏ
ଭାଗିରଥୀ ରଥ।
ନାଇଁ, ତାଙ୍କୁ ଅବଶ୍ୟ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିନି, ହେଲେ
ଆଚ୍ଛା।
ଚିତ୍ତ ସାର୍ ବୋଲି ଅଛନ୍ତି ଜଣେ।
ହଁ ହଁ, ଚିତ୍ତରଞ୍ଜନ ସାର୍।
ହୁଁ। ସେଇଟା
ସେଇଠି
ଅଛି।
ତାହେଲେ ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ ହଉଛି?
ବହୁତ ଜାଗା ହଉଛି ସେଠି।
ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି କଣ ମୋର ପ୍ରୋବ୍ଲେମ କଣ, ମୁଁ ନିଜେ ହିଁ ରିହାବିଲିଟେସନ ଫିଲ୍ଡରେ ଜବ୍ କରେ।
ହୁଁ।
ମାନେ ସିଆରସି ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ କମ୍ପୋଜିଟ ରିଜନାଲ ସେଣ୍ଟର ସବୁ ଅଛି, ମୁଁ ସେଇଠି ୱାର୍କ କରେ। ତ ମୁଁ ଭାବିଲି କଣ, ମୁଁ ଏଇ ଭିତରେ ତ ରହୁଛି, ମୁଁ ଏଇଠି ହିଁ ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ କରିନେବି କହିକି ମୁଁ ଲେଟର କରେଇଦେଲି। ଏବେ ଇସ୍ୟୁ ଆସୁଛି ଯେ ମୁଁ ନିଜେ ସ୍ପେଶାଲ ଏଜୁକେସନ, ପୁଣି ସାଇକୋଲୋଜି, ଦିଟା ସେକ୍ସନ ମୁଁ କେମିତି ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାରେ ରହିକି ସୋ କରେଇବି, ସେଟା ମତେ ପ୍ରୋବ୍ଲେମ ଆସୁଛି। ମୁଁ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ପଚାରିଲି ଓଡିଶାରେ କୋଉଠିକି ହଉଛି, ଯଦି ମୋର ହେଇପାରିବ।
ରହୁଛନ୍ତି କୋଉଠି?
ମୁଁ
ଆପଣ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି କୋଉଠି?
ମୁଁ ଶିଲଂରେ।
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
ଶିଲଂ।
ଆପଣ ତାହେଲେ ଓଡିଶା ଆସିକି କରିବେ?
ମୁଁ ଭାବୁଛି
ହ୍ୟାଲୋ।
କଣ, ଗୋଟେ ମାସ ଛୁଟି ନେଇକି ପଳେଇବି, ସେଠି କରିଦେଇ ଆସିବି। ଆଉ ଏଠି ଯଦି ମୋ ଅଫିସ ରେ
ହୁଁ
ହେଇପାରିବନି,
ହୁଁ।
ମୁଁ ଆଉ ଯାଇକି ରାତିରେ କାମ କରିପାରିବିନି ନା।
ନା ନା, ଦିଟା ଜାଗାରେ କି ଆପଣ ନିଜେ ସେଣ୍ଟରରେ ରହିକି ନିଜେ କେମିତି କାମ କରିବେ?
ହଁ, ସେଇଟା ହେଇପାରିବନି। ମତେ କିନ୍ତୁ ଡାଇରେକ୍ଟର କହିଲେ ଯେ
ଆଚ୍ଛା।
ହଁ ହେଇପାରିବ, ତୁ ଆମର ଏଇଠି ଇଣ୍ଟର୍ନସିପ ଦଉଛୁ ନା, ଆମେ ବି ନିଜେ ସାଇକୋଲୋଜି ପିଲାମାନଙ୍କୁ
ନାଇଁ ନାଇଁ, ନାଇଁ ସିଏ ଭାବୁଥିବେ ଯେ ଯେହେତୁ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ସେଣ୍ଟର, ନିଜର ଓନ୍ ସେଣ୍ଟର ଅଛି, ତେଣୁ ମେ ବି ମାନୁପୁଲେସନ ହେଇପାରେ ବୋଲି ସେଥିପାଇଁ ସେ ରିଜେକ୍ଟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ହଁ, ସେଇଟା କଣ ମାନେ ସେଇଟା ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି କଣ, ମାନେ ଦିଟା ମାନେ ସେଗ୍ରିଗେଟ ହେଇପାରିବନି ନା। ମୁଁ 8 ଆୱାର ଡ୍ୟୁଟି ଦଉଛି ମାନେ ମୋ ସେକ୍ଟରରେ ମୁଁ 8 ଆୱାର ଡ୍ୟୁଟି ଦଉଛି। କିନ୍ତୁ ମୁଁ ସାଇକୋଲୋଜି ଯାଇକି ରହିକି ମୋ ସେକ୍ସନ ଟାକୁ ବି ତ ମତେ ଡିଲ୍ କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ।
ମ୍ୟାଡାମ ସପୋଜ ଯୋଉ ସାର୍ ମାନେ ବି ଧରା ଯାଉ ଆମକୁ ଟିଚିଂ କୁ ଦଉଛନ୍ତି, ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ
ହଁ
ଇନଷ୍ଟିଚ୍ୟୁଟ ରେ ରହିକି ଯଦି କାମ କରୁଥିବେ ସେଇ ଲୋକ ଯଦି ଭାଇବାରେ ବି ଆସିଲା ହେଇପାରିବନି। ସେମ୍ ଲୋକ ସେଠି ମାର୍କ ଦବ, ସେମ୍ ଲୋକ
ହଁ
ଭାଇବାରେ କେମିତି ମାର୍କ ଦବ? ତେଣୁ ସେ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ବି
ହଁ
ତାଙ୍କୁ ବି
ସେଇଟା।
ରିଜେକ୍ଟ କରାହଉଛି।
ହୁଁ। ଠିକ ଅଛି,
ତେଣୁ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ
ମୁଁ ଯଦି ଚେଷ୍ଟାରେ ହେଇପାରୁଛି ତାହେଲେ ମୁଁ ଯାଇକି କରିଦେଇ ପାରିବି ଭାଗିରଥି ସାରଙ୍କ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ କଥା ହେଇକି।
ମେନ୍ କଥା ହଉଛି କଣ, ଆମେ ତ ଯିବା, ଆମେ ତ ଇନ ସର୍ଭିସ ବାଲା ନା ସମସ୍ତେ, ତେଣୁ ମାସେ ଯାକେ ସମୟ ଦେଇ ହବନି ନା ଥୋଡି ନା। ତେଣୁ
ସେମାନେ
ଆମେ
ଏମିତି
ଖୋଜୁଛୁ କଣ,
ଲେଖିଛନ୍ତି। ହଁ
ମାନେ 45 ଡେଜ ଦେଇ ହବନି, ଆମେ ରେଗୁଲାର ଦେଇପାରିବନି। ଇଆଡେ ଆସିଲା ବେଳକୁ ସେ କହିବେ ଘରକୁ ପଳା ବୋଲି ଚାକିରିରୁ।
30 ଡେଜ୍ ହେଇଯିବ, ମିନିମମ୍ 30 ଡେଜ୍ ରହିବା କଥା।
30 days ତ ହଉଛି, ସେମାନେ ନିଜେ ହିଁ ଲେଖି ଦେଇଛନ୍ତି, କିନ୍ତୁ
ନାଇଁ
ଏଇଟା
ନାଇଁ
ଆମେ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ
ନାଇଁ
ଗୋଟେ
30
ଜିନିଷ
ଡେଜ
ଆମେ
ବି
ରିକ୍ୱେଷ୍ଟ
କହିକି
କରିବା, ଯଦି 200 କାମ କରିପାରିବା ଦିନକୁ, ତାହେଲେ
ମ୍ୟାଡାମ
4-5
30 ଡେ
ଘଣ୍ଟା 2 ଘଣ୍ଟା କରିକି
ନା
କରିଦବା।
ନା ନା ଶୁଣନ୍ତୁ, 30 ଡେଜ ଟେ ବି ଗୋଟେ ଇନ ସର୍ଭିସ ବାଲା ରହିକି କାମ କରିବା ସମ୍ଭବ ନୁହଁ।
କରିପାରିବେନି ନା, କେହି ବି କରିପାରିବେନି। ମୁଁ ସେଇଆକୁ ଚିନ୍ତା
କିଏ
କରୁଛି,
କରିପାରିବେ?
କଣ ସବୁ
ତେଣୁ
ଆପଣ
ଆମେ
କରିବେ।
ଆମେ
ମୁଁ ତ
ଆମେ
ନିଜେ
ତ
ଖଟିଲି
ସବଷ୍ଟିଟ୍ୟୁଟ
ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ।
ଆମେ ସବଷ୍ଟିଟ୍ୟୁଟ ଚିନ୍ତା କରୁ,
କହିଲି
ଯୋଉଠି କି 10-12 ଦିନ ଯାଇ କାମ କରିହବ।
ଆଉ କିନ୍ତୁ ସେମାନେ 24 ମାନେ ଫୁଲ ଟୁ 40 hours ର
ହଁ
ସାର୍ଟିଫିକେଟ ଦେଇଦେବେ।
ସାର୍ଟିଫିକେଟ ଦେବେ।
ସାର୍ ମତେ ଆପଣଙ୍କ କଣ୍ଟାକ୍ଟ ନମ୍ବର ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ, ମୁଁ ପୁରା ଟେନସନ ହେଇଗଲିଣି ଏଇ ଭିତରେ।
କଣ କରିବା ଆଉ, କଣ ଆମେ ଯାଇକି
ଆପଣ
30
ଗ୍ରୁପରେ
ଦିନ ମ୍ୟାଡାମ
ନାହାନ୍ତି?
ରହିକି କାମ କରିବୁ?
ସରି, ଆମେ ଏଇ କଥା କାଲି ପରଦିନ